your idea of success is different and you shouldn't like base it on what your peers are doing.
Welcome to the Game of Her Own podcast, your go-to place for empowering behind-the-scenes stories of trailblazing women who work in the sports and event industry. I'm your host, Jahaan Blake, and I'm honored to bring you this free resource where you'll hear firsthand accounts of how these incredible women got their seat at the table. And I will personally share strategies to help develop your leadership skills in this industry. We've got a lot to explore together. I am so glad you're here. All right, Game of Her Own listeners, let's do this. Lacey Mencl, Legal Counsel for the National Women's Soccer League. Welcome to the Game of Her Own podcast. I'm so glad you're here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I've been such a fan of this podcast, so it's like an honor to be one of the guests.
Can you tell people what you said when I asked you to be on the podcast?
I was like, I think I would pass away. Like it would be just so exciting for me.
I know. I could not stop laughing. I came home and told my husband, I was like, she said she'd pass away. She'd pass away. I was like, I can't. She said yes, but I was like, I'll take that. That was the biggest compliment ever. But I'm excited that you're here. Let's kick it off with, tell us, what's one piece of advice you wish you had received earlier in your career?
What it took me a little bit longer to realize is that everybody has different goals and aspirations and different paths and different ways of getting there. And I think as long as you stay true to yourself, which sounds like incredibly corny, but really if you know yourself and you know what you want out of your career, you'll somehow end up where you want to be when you need to be there. And that could take a bunch of different forms and different ways to navigate there, but you eventually will end up where you need to be.
Do you feel like you ended up where you need to be? Because you just came to Chicago right before COVID or during COVID?
So in sort of the midst of COVID, it was, I moved here, I think September of 2021. So yeah, I've been here a couple years now. When people ask me like how long I've been in Chicago, I always identify as like a new Chicago resident, but I feel like now I'm getting to the point where maybe I'm like not all that new, but there's still so much to explore here that it's always something exciting.
I honestly, it wasn't until recently, and I've been in Chicago 13 or 14 years. It wasn't until like the last 3 or 4 years I was like, oh, you're from here now. Like
Yes.
you're not like, you didn't just move to Chicago. For the longest time, it's like, oh, I moved to Chicago for work. And people be like, oh, when? I'm like, oh, like 2010. Like,
Right.
a long time ago. So yeah, so
Right.
you're from Chicago now. But where did you come from? Tell everybody that journey and like how it came to be that you moved here.
Yeah, so I am from a suburb about 10 minutes south of Cleveland. So I identify as a Clevelander, and I went to high school there. I went to college at Kent State University, and then I got my law degree at Cleveland State University Law School. So I am just like a Northeast Ohio girl. That's really where I grew up and had my early adulthood. I was a sports administration major at Kent State, and my minor was in business. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to work in sports, full stop. So during college, I really took that time to take different internships, explore different sort of departments of what I thought maybe I would like. I remember at one time I did a shadow day at the Cleveland Cavaliers, and it was like marketing, full throttle marketing. And I realized like, ooh, I don't know, like I love the environment. I love being in sports, but I don't know that marketing would be something that I'd be great at or that I'd love. So I worked at the Kent State football recruiting office, really enjoyed that, got exposed to sort of NCAA regulations and things like that. When I was graduating, I still wasn't sure, but the dream is working for a pro sports team in Cleveland. So the Cleveland Cavaliers had a posting for a seasonal sourcing person, and I had no idea what that meant, but I threw my hat in the ring and, ended up getting it and just fully embraced it. It ended up being sort of an odd, like, branch of finance. I was dealing like with a lot of invoices.
Oh, that makes sense. Because I was like, I don't even know what that means. Got it. Okay.
Yeah. from there, my cubicle was right next door to the associate general counsel at the Cleveland Cavaliers. And I talked to him a lot, and I just ended up going to law school. So
I'm sorry. You just kind of glossed over how you just decided to go to law school. Is that it? Like did you have interest before?
I did. I knew I wanted to get some sort of higher education. I didn't know if that would be a master's in sports management, or I had always like kind of thought law school would be something that I would enjoy, but I just didn't see the path for sports and law to really intersect until working at the Cavs.
All right. Whose office did you sit outside of their title again?
Associate general counsel.
So did you use that time to sort of learn all you could about legal, or at least ask a bunch of questions?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would hear, not like listening, but I would like hear sort of the conversations he would have, the people who would stop over at his desk to like ask for status updates on things. And I just thought it was really fascinating how his role really encompassed like every department in some way across the organization. And I also I wanted a leadership role at some point in my career. I knew that. And I knew that, I'm a woman for one. I have a sports administration bachelor's. I just felt I needed some way to differentiate myself if I wanted to sort of climb that ladder or start the process of climbing that ladder. So I ended up in law school.
Right. My sister's a lawyer, so I know the commitment and the sacrifices that you have to make. So I mean, you went in and you knew like, okay, I'm going to go to law school. Obviously, correct me if I'm wrong here, but you're going to go to law school and then you're going to find a job in sports using your legal expertise. Is that right?
Yeah, I knew that I wanted to be in sports. And I think like when you asked me about what advice I would impart, I think that sort of comes from that time in my life, because in law school, it's a very different group of people than like what I was used to for sure. So there are people that, they want to do big law. They want to work for the government. There's just all of these different goals that people have. But truly, I felt like mine was just like very different. Like I would have been thrilled working in NCAA compliance in college athletics. My goal was to be at a team or league. And I sometimes felt pressure from watching my peers, do the whole firm thing. And, I'm working at a university in compliance. Like they're so different, but your idea of success is different, and you shouldn't like base it on what your peers are doing.
Was that hard to do?
Yeah.
Watching your peers. I mean, let's be real, right? In law, you go through a lot, but then you make a lot, right? And especially when you go to work for a big firm, I should say, right? And so I can only imagine like how that felt. Were you in your 20s, early 20s when this is happening?
Yeah, I took a gap year when I was at the Cavs, and then I was in like my early to mid 20s.
Yeah.
So
talk about what that was like, just seeing your friends, your lawyer friends bringing in a lot of money and working a different type of job than you. And you also had this, but you had the same, education, if you will, right? And like, it's hard because you're not going to go in as a newbie into the NCAA and be like, well, I'm a lawyer. You need to pay me the same as people make over there at the firms, right? Like it doesn't work that way. Like how did you get past that?
It was more difficult my first year, just because I think, everybody is trying to get used to law school and get used to the grind and, figure out what they want to do. So, and everybody you feel like has similar aspirations. So like going to a firm, going to the prosecutor's office, like whatever it is. But I think after the summer of my first year, like I was just more confident in myself, honestly. And I felt like I'm comfortable with where I want my career trajectory to go. And like, it's maybe not the most typical aspirations, but this is what I want to pursue. And like, now I need to start thinking about how I can meet my marks to start making that happen for me. Like, who do I need to connect with? What areas do I need to explore still to make this dream happen.
It sounds like to me, you defined what success looked like for you and only you. And then you made a plan and followed it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Almost,
that's definitely what I tried to do. We had a really robust entertainment and sports law association in law school, and I met some of still my closest friends from law school through that. And, there were opportunities sort of presented through that I latched onto and like really enjoyed. So I was really lucky in that aspect that there were like some of my people, at least in law school.
yeah, I love that defining success like for you and only you. It's like a weight off your shoulders almost, right? I mean, there's still the pressure to succeed, how you defined it, but also just knowing that you're doing it because you want to, not because like it's this cookie cutter model that you need to follow. And this is what you need to do.
Yeah. Sports law, entertainment law, they're still really competitive fields. But I think like the typical way everyone follows is you go to like a transactional law firm, usually big law, ideally, and then, you can transition in-house from there. The caveat there is you don't know like how long that'll take. Like it could be years. And there are so few jobs at teams and leagues that you got to really bet on yourself.
So you bet on yourself, and now you're at the National Women's Soccer League, which is incredible. And as a former soccer player, still a soccer player at heart, you're in a place where I'm like, oh, what's going on in there? I want to see. Like, I want to see how they're making things behind the scenes. So what was it like going after that job? Take us through that whole sort of journey.
So I graduated law school during COVID, 2020. We didn't have like a graduation or anything like that. I was like a summer associate at a small firm in Cleveland, but I knew like the second the sports world started opening back up and taking applicants, like I was going to take whatever opportunity I could. I'm a former soccer player as well. Like soccer has always just been near and dear to my heart. And I happened upon it was a paralegal posting for the National Women's Soccer League. At that point, I'd already passed the bar, not long ago, albeit, but I saw the description and I felt like they maybe would be open to somebody with a little bit more experience. So I applied and I got an interview. And before I knew it, I was agreeing to move to Chicago to start my new role. So it was a whirlwind. I'd never left Cleveland before, as we sort of discussed. So it was definitely a big step for me to move here and go outside my comfort zone in a city I'd never really been before. But it was definitely an awesome start to the next chapter.
Were you nervous?
Yeah, I was very nervous. I knew nothing about Chicago. I remember like doing research on, places to live. My boyfriend at the time came with me. So we're married now, which thank goodness it worked out. But
yeah, you said boyfriend at the time. I was like, uh-oh, he might not be in the picture.
No,
but you got married. Okay.
persevered. Yeah. So it was what I needed to like fully believe in myself too, was just a full change of scenery. Like these are all people I haven't connected with, people I don't know. In Cleveland, I was like a member of the WISE community, Women in Sports and Entertainment. And I like feel like I really knew everyone. I grew up there. So it was overdue for me to sort of change my scenery.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So you start this job, you're a paralegal. I'm imagining you weren't planning on being a paralegal forever or for very long. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I had hoped not. But I was willing, I mentioned before, sort of just betting on yourself and knowing I would find a way to try and rise to the occasion. I was just ready to work. Like I was ready to do whatever I needed to do. I was willing to make the leap.
Okay, so paint the picture for those of us who are not in the law sector. So if you pass the bar, you don't typically take a paralegal job. Is that correct?
No, that's unusual. I think at the time it was like paralegal, legal assistant. I know sometimes in the sports arena, you can try that. It's a good way to just try and smuggle your way in, really, because it is so competitive and there are people who are just simply not willing to start at something they think that they're more qualified than. And that is so valid. And I don't know if it would have worked out the other way. I don't know if I'd be saying like, yeah, it was a great idea. It was a risk, absolutely, but it was one I was willing to take at the time. So
Yes, I love that risk. And I love that you didn't look at the job and say, nah, that's not for me. Like I deserve to have a better title. I just went through 3 years of hell. I mean, 3 years of law school and I deserve more. And were you vocal? I think a lot of people could learn from this, regardless of what level, right? You could be a director and deciding to transition over to a different department and take a step back in order to go forward. Were you transparent when you were talking to the people who were interviewing you, what you wanted out of your career?
yeah, I think like my resume said, like, I'm a licensed attorney. My cover letter said I'm a licensed attorney. I'm hoping that I'm somebody that can transition into a full legal role. I wasn't going to be picky on title, like whether it's staff counsel, associate counsel, like whatever it was, I was willing to sort of be flexible, but I absolutely did want that lawyer title because I think it makes your job easier and I needed it for sure. In hindsight, I don't know how tough I was on it though, because I wanted the job and I wanted the opportunity to prove myself.
Yeah.
And I felt like once I was here and once I could show my work ethic, I'd be able to point to that and say, hey, like I've done X, Y, and Z. I'm good at this. Like I think that you need to give me a shot.
I mean, clearly they've given you a shot. You nailed it. And you just won an award to wait, let me see if I can do this without you telling me. It was the Women to Watch 2023 WISE Chicago. Is that correct?
That is right. Yeah.
Yes. That's where I asked for everybody to be on the podcast. I was like, oh, people need to hear from you for sure. They gave you a shot. You took a risk and they said yes. And now you're legal counsel. So how many moves did you make to get to legal counsel? And like, was there any self-doubt involved in that? Like imposter syndrome? Like, wait, I've never been in this role before. Can I do this?
Yeah, I really definitely had self-doubt at a lot of different points. I think a lot of times, like from the outside, right? Like somebody goes to law school and you just think they know every single intricacy of every single law and topic from top to bottom. And that sometimes is like not the case. A lot of times I would say it's not the case. It was a lot of long hours and trying to stay on top of everything. We're a small but mighty crew here for sure. I think I was very fortunate that I had a manager that tried to instill confidence in me and tried to sort of allow me to trust my gut. And so, like, when I'd be talking things through, he would be like, well, no, I think that is how you should be looking at it. Like, that's a good judgment call. And little things like that just, I think, really help somebody to trust themselves more and maybe get over a little bit of that self-doubt. Yeah, that's sort of how I dealt with it.
I like how right, your manager, I'm like taking a minute because I'm like having flashbacks of times when my manager would say like, no, that's good. Like run with it, run with it. And then I'd be like, oh, why did I second guess myself? Oh, did they think that I was guessing myself? Like I would get in my head. I am the worst. I think it's why I do this podcast to help other people get out of their heads. But you took the feedback and like you heard it. And then you just were like, I'm imagining you were like, okay, my manager's telling me this is good. Then just go, like keep going and keep doing, like your gut is right. Is that how it sort of played out for you?
I think that I still wanted my manager to gut check me like a lot, just especially in the early times, because I wanted to make sure I was still going down the right path and that it wasn't just a one-off or maybe I was seeing something in the wrong light. And I still do that. I still gut check with other people and coworkers to make sure that there's something I'm not missing or something that I should be thinking more wholesomely about. So, and I think that's important. I think you should be bouncing your ideas off of people. And I'm a big proponent of definitely trusting yourself, but, with caveats sometimes.
So it's like that delicate balance of believing in yourself, but not like living in a vacuum where only what you say is like the truth. Also bouncing it off people, and you're not bouncing it off people just so you feel validated.
Right.
right? Like there's a difference between like the gut check, bouncing your ideas off each other, off people, but then also like trying to seek validation.
Yeah.
When that should come from within. Is that fair to say?
Yep, that's exactly right. I definitely agree with that.
Okay, so if you said this already, I'm sorry. How many moves did you make to get to legal counsel? And I say how many moves, but like how many different title changes, I guess is the right way to say it.
I am on number 3. So I was
That's
like
awesome.
paralegal and then associate counsel and then legal counsel.
Hey, Game of Thrones listeners, Jahaan popping in here. Do you ever feel overlooked at work or perhaps unsure how to advocate for yourself? You are not alone. And it's exactly why I've created a free training called Empower Your Career, Mastering the Art of Self-Advocacy for Promotion and Raises. In this training, I will teach you tactics like how to have meaningful interactions with your leadership team, how to increase your confidence, and there's so much more. You'll walk away with the tools to confidently seize control of your career growth. So, what do you think? Are you ready to stop being overlooked and start being noticed? If you are, the link to sign up is in the show notes. Let's elevate your career together. All right, let's get back to the episode. So, how did you advocate for yourself? Going through those different roles?
Yeah, I think my job sort of naturally started to encompass more. I think as we spoke about, like I definitely dealt with some self-doubt at times and I wasn't always sure I was doing the right thing or what. And I was still very early in my career. I still am. So I didn't know like what a normal range of work really was. I just had my head down and was fully in it. And I was fortunate enough that I had a manager who noticed and who, felt that I deserved a promotion and more work flexibility.
I think as people are listening and then they don't have manager like your manager, it is like the dream to have that manager who can, it's tough. And you may be there now or you might be there someday, but it's like, okay, as a manager, you got to advocate for yourself. And then if you have a team, you have to advocate for all of them and what they want and what they need and be realistic with them and be clear and kind and give them feedback. And it's a tough job. So when you speak so highly of your manager, and I believe there's a lot of people listening going, oh man, she's so lucky. Like somebody in your corner, like that's all we all want is somebody who's talking about us when we're not in the room. And obviously in a positive way, someone who's being our cheerleader for sure.
Yeah, I think our leadership team here has done a really good job about sort of cultivating that type of culture with management specifically. Our team has grown since then. So, we've added 2 additional lawyers and we grew very rapidly. So sort of figuring out like the cadence of things and who's doing what can be really difficult. But I think, a good manager can really sort of relieve that tension and make things run smoothly and make the main thing is like I had felt appreciated. And so when you feel appreciated, you work a lot harder and you're not as annoyed of a call at like 7 p.m. You're not as annoyed of so I think it really goes a long way.
Yeah, that is nice of you not to be annoyed when someone calls you at 7 p.m. But but it's true though, when you feel appreciated and you love what you do, you don't mind. So like when I'm like, oh, someone called me at 7. But if my coaching clients called me at 7, I'd be like, I'm definitely crossing a boundary, but what do you need? Like, let's talk.
Right.
You can't
Yeah.
like, I love the work I do. That also makes a huge difference. Okay, more thing before we get to the final sprint is tell us, you are really good at networking because I remember how we very first like met, like met really. It was in some LinkedIn group. Oh, the name is escaping me. A seat at the table. I think you posted something like, I'm coming to Chicago, moving to Chicago for work. Does anybody basically you're like, does anyone want to get together? And first of all, what I loved about, and I think that was your post. Does that sound familiar? Something along those lines?
That would be it. Yep.
Yes. So to me, I was like, okay, finally, it's not someone just like someone asking for advice. And there's nothing wrong with that. However, that it's harder because that's everyone needs advice. It's harder to make connections that way, because everyone's just like, yeah, I could give you some advice. I'm a little busy. I don't know, like, oh, that's a lot to write. I'm not going to write it. For me, I stay away from those. So I'm like, I don't want them to think I'm pitching my services. Like, even though they're not my target client, I leave it alone. So, and you see them that they don't get a ton of responses usually. I saw yours and I was like, oh, now that's the way to do it. And I was like, oh, I'd love to meet her. This would be so fun. Like, just to meet another woman in sports in Chicago. And I think we tried to make it work, but because of COVID, I think that's the reason, like, it didn't happen. But who knew we'd be at events together and then you'd be on the podcast, right? Like, but talk about, by the way, everybody, that was a very long-winded way to get to my question. Talk about how has, I guess, networking impacted your career?
Yeah, networking has been huge in really everything I've done. I think back to like my freshman year of college, and I had gone to like a job fair at I think it was like at Quicken Loans Arena, like at the Cavs, Rocket Mortgage Field House now. But they had a job fair and there was like a little table where it was like Wise Cleveland, and they had like applications to like be a member, and then they had applications for like a scholarship for women that were pursuing a career in sports and entertainment. And so I ended up applying for that, and I ended up winning a scholarship from Wise Cleveland. And I remember going to their Women of Inspiration event that May and meeting all of the Women of Inspiration honorees. And I made some like amazing contacts there. And, I think back also to my job shadows that I had at like the Cleveland Cavaliers. In high school, I did a marketing job shadow. And I remember emailing that contact, even though I didn't love marketing, like I said, I emailed him like quarterly, just giving him updates like, hey, I'm doing this internship. Hey, I'm going to be graduating soon. Is there any opportunities there? And that's ultimately where I got my first role out of college was through that connection. At least I think. I assume they have a reference program where you can put forth like good applicants for certain positions. And then similarly, when I moved to Chicago, I didn't know anyone. I hadn't even met my coworkers in person yet. And so I was a member of some different networking groups on LinkedIn. And I figured like this might be a good way to just meet some like-minded people that I know for a fact I'll have things to talk about because we both work in the sports industry. So I think that it's just been crucial in every aspect of my career. Definitely encourage it. It's sometimes hard and very awkward, but once you get over that initial LinkedIn message or that initial virtual coffee or real coffee, whatever it is, it ends up being a really powerful tool.
Okay, so I know that you just turned 30. Like, is this something that you will continue to do, or was this a sort of help you get to where you are now?
No, I genuinely enjoy forming relationships with people across our industry, really. I think you never know when it might be helpful to talk to somebody about something similar you're going through. Maybe they worked at somewhere that you're looking to maybe work, or maybe you just want to like commiserate over the difficulties of your everyday world. And like, that's awesome. And you don't even need them to help you to get from A to B. It could just really be a genuine connection and somebody that you grow to really respect.
Yes, I love networking, and I could be super awkward sometimes, and people do not believe me when I tell them that. And maybe it's all in my head, but I feel awkward. But like, I've made some really good connections and just met some really great people. And it's fun. And sometimes it helps my career, where people are able to like, where it's noticeable, right? Like, wow, this person helped me land for me, it'd be a client, right? A new contract. But sometimes it's just for fun too, just to be able to talk to somebody who's, like you said, I'm literally repeating what you just said, who are going through the same thing. It makes a huge difference. I'll say this one last thing. You're like, sometimes people aren't going to respond to you. That's okay. Like, yes, it's really weird sometimes to send that message to the person that you don't know, but you really need to talk to. But if they don't respond, oh well, maybe they're busy. Maybe they don't like talking on Zoom. Maybe maybe it's not
Right.
their thing, but it's not for you. So that door's closed, move on, because there's so many more doors. Like there's so many more, and there's so many people who want to help, like you, like yourself. Like I can see you, people being like reaching out to you. I'm thinking going into law for sports. Will you talk to me? And I imagine the answer would be absolutely.
Yeah, it definitely always is. I will say sometimes I end up not being as responsive as I want to be, but I always do circle back. Like I'll go through those messages and be like, I got to get back to this person. Like, they sent me a note and want to touch base. So I do circle back. But yeah, I mean, totally. I remember doing that in law school for sure, just sending LinkedIn messages to folks trying to get a feel for what they did. And I think it's an important point too, that when you're sending these notes, you don't just outwardly want to be asking for a job, right? Like if there's a posting in their organization and you're just saying, hi, like my name's so and so, I applied for this job. Like, can you help me get it? That's a little bit inappropriate. But if you're saying, hey, I want to learn about what you do every day, how did you get from where you are to where you are now? And, how can I sort of replicate that? Like that's a totally different conversation.
Yeah.
So there's different ways to tweak it to try and get folks to reply.
Yes, totally agree. I once responded to somebody like 6 months later on LinkedIn because I'm really bad at LinkedIn messages. And that person ended up becoming my client. So it's just, hey, it's okay to reach back out to people if someone responded to you or hasn't responded to you. You can reach back out and say, hey, just checking in. Like just go
Yeah,
for it.
totally.
I always say this to myself, so I feel like I can say it to you all. Like, get out of your own head and just take some action. It will be fine. You will be fine. All right, let's go to the final sprint. I'm going to ask you 5 questions. First one, what's a goal you achieved that initially you weren't sure you could reach?
I mean, I think that the law school thing for me was super daunting at first. The application process to like the Socratic method to the bar exam, that environment really tends to sort of breed self-doubt no matter what accolades you have. So it definitely is a goal I reached and surpassed, and I'm very proud of it.
Yes, congratulations. I know it was a while ago, but still, congratulations. Okay, number 2, what's your go-to pump-up song?
Easy. Lose Yourself by Eminem every time.
Oh, okay. All right. Eminem, you would get along with my husband very well. What's your favorite way to unwind after a busy day?
So my husband and I famously love a good Bachelor franchise. So, you know, we'll turn that on after a long day of work. And I guess more importantly, I have 2 dogs. I don't know how like stress relieving they actually are, but they add something to my day, that's for sure.
Yes. Yeah, mine are in the background right now fighting, like play fighting, and a little stressful since I'm recording a podcast, but that's fine. That's fine.
Incredible. They always have impeccable
Yeah.
timing.
Oh, it's unbelievable. But if I lock them out, then they would scratch at the door. It's a whole thing. The franchise, the Bachelor franchise, like I feel like that's more respectable than my husband and I are obsessed with Love is Blind.
I'm watching that
Obsessed.
now as well. Yep.
Yeah.
Season
Yeah.
6, man. It's been a
Season
wild ride.
yeah, season 6 I would say is the best season. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been incredible. Although The Bachelor right now is really good too. I'm a big fan of Joey. So
I've never watched The Bachelor.
you got to get with it. You need to give it a chance. I wasn't either. And then once I started, I truly could not be stopped.
Yeah.
What
Maybe that's the problem. I had a friend that was on it, and
was
I
on it?
watched, yeah, and like I watched like the 3 episodes or 4 episodes she was on. And I was like, when she got kicked off or whatever you guys call it, I was kind of like, I can't take this anymore. I can't watch this show.
Just moved on. What I would give for somebody I knew to be on it. Oh my gosh. I think I would like lose my mind. That'd be insane.
Her friends did lose, like she's a friend of a friend, I should say. Like her friends did, everyone like lost their mind. It was really funny.
That's awesome. Oh my God.
Okay, I'm really bad at making these go by quickly. What's one thing that always makes you laugh out loud?
Yeah, so this one, I famously have a very dry sense of humor. I love like sarcasm and like quick-witted one-liners. So I don't know if there's like a specific one that I can point to, but I'll know it when I hear it. And
Yep.
that'll get me.
So you must have loved Ted Lasso.
I never saw it actually.
What?
I
I think
know.
you would like it because of what you just said. I think you would like it.
I do. It's been on my list for a while, so I have to just break down. Maybe after The Bachelor's done, I can
There you go.
revisit that. But yeah, I definitely need to watch it because I've heard it would be up my alley for sure.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, last one. Name one woman in sports who inspires you and tell us why.
So there's so many, right? Like I was always a big Pat Summitt fan.
Me
Um,
too.
Yeah, she's an absolute icon. I was not prepped for this in any way, but Jessica Berman, commissioner of the NWSL, I mean, she's incredibly inspiring. She walked into like such a unique situation, and the way she's handled herself in front of the media, in front of the board, in front of stakeholders has been, I think, just an incredible thing for someone as early in their career like myself to witness. She has a way of really analyzing and like thinking through potential problems. And it's not lost on me, like just what an incredible learning opportunity it is to see her in action every day.
That's
I
awesome.
mean, and I know it's like women in sports for sure. But I think I'd be remiss if I didn't like shout out Bill Ordauer as well. He's our chief legal officer, and just like seeing his hard work every day and
Yeah.
his work ethic and ability to have sometimes difficult conversations has just been really inspiring. So I guess NWSL for the win, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a great place to be.
Yeah. It sounds like you are in a place that has a really good culture and the climate. Also, I had that conversation with the past guest. The climate is also like aligns with the culture, which is important. So that's good. That's good. I'm very happy for you. And Jessica Berman is fantastic. I remember being super nervous when I interviewed her for the podcast, but so grateful she said yes. Listeners, I will link to that episode as well in the show notes so you can listen to it. Okay, Lacey, I have taken up a lot of your time. How can someone get in touch with you if they wanted to do so?
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best bet, Lacey Mencl. And shoot me a message, shoot me a request. I'd be happy to connect.
All right, very good. Thank you so much for this time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I loved every second.
Ladies, now it's your turn. I want you to go out and take some action on things that you learned today from Lacey. We covered a lot of ground today. One thing I want to talk to you guys about is how Lacey decided to define success for her and not follow someone else's path. Are you living someone else's version of success? Now, you have to remember success is a personal journey and it looks different for everyone. If you're pursuing someone else's idea of accomplishment, you might never feel truly satisfied and you risk missing out on what you genuinely desire. So how do you navigate this? How do you take some steps? If you find yourself constantly comparing your achievements to others, or if you're feeling unfulfilled despite reaching the goals set by others, it's time to redefine what you mean by success. What does it mean to you? I would recommend that you start identifying some of your values. What lights your soul on fire? What are your aspirations? What makes you happy? What gives you a unique sense of purpose? You can use these answers as a compass to guide your career towards whatever you define as success. Now, I know sometimes these questions can be a little daunting. If you need some guidance, I have a free workbook. Just head to jahanblake.com/free and download the workbook named Getting Clear on What Matters Most. It will help you think through what is the most important thing to you and what does success look like. I want to thank you for spending time with me. It's not lost on me that you have so many other choices out there. Could you do me a favor? Could you share this episode with another woman? My goal is to empower as many of us as possible to remind everybody that they are capable and worthy of achieving their dream career. They are capable and worthy of earning their seat at the table. Thank you for sharing this with another woman, and thank you for listening. I am so glad you're here. All right, my friends, until next week, in the meantime, it's your turn. Please go out there and continue to take some action.